Calling all moms, dads, parents who want to enjoy their reading hobby again or make more time for it. You've come to the right place. Yay! So glad to have you here. As a mom of two really young kids who also works, I understand absolutely the struggle of keeping your hobbies alive while raising a family. And I want to today share some solidarity around that, commiserate together a bit on it. But also, I want to share a couple of things that have helped me make reading a regular part of my life again, kind of post baby fog. Now that I've got two kids who still need me basically every moment they're awake, but a little bit less so than when I was like breastfeeding and caring for an infant. I have a video actually on my channel already from a while back where I share when I read, what I read, and how I read. And that video included a long breakdown of my somewhat divisive three formats method. And I'll give you a little recap of that here as well before I get into some new tips, but I'll link that video down below too if you want like the big rundown. But a short recap. So my three formats approach is that I always have a book going in three different formats that are easily accessible to me at any given time. So I always have one audiobook, one physical book, and one ebook that I read on my phone, not on like a separate Kindle. It's on my phone that's with me all day, every day, right? As they are these days. So for me, personally, I like having them be three different books. So each format is a different book. But I know that for some people, that's overwhelming to have three different like narratives going at once. And so I'd still recommend that you consider what formats would facilitate you being able to read more often throughout the day and then getting the book you're reading in more than one format. Mine are almost always from the library, no matter which format I'm talking about here, or included with my Kindle Unlimited subscription. So I'm not suggesting you go out and spend a ton of money to have it in all different formats. Although if you want to purchase them all in each format, like whatever floats your boat, right? That's your money, not mine. But there's ways to do this without it becoming like a financial burden to get the same book in multiple different formats, right? But this just makes it so much easier for me to just read whenever and wherever I am and to fit reading in around the other responsibilities in my life. So for example, in any given day, I might listen to my audiobook on my commute to work after I drop my girls off at daycare. Then at my lunch break, I might read my ebook on my phone, then listen to my audiobook again on the way home while I go pick up my daughters. And then I might read my physical book at the end of the day after they're both in bed. Just for example, right? So having the different formats really helps me find time in whatever pocket of time I know I have something available, a story to immerse myself in, and a way to get back in touch with this hobby that means so much to me without having to like carry a book with me everywhere or not being able to read it when I'm driving, for example. The other main tip I shared in that first iteration of this video is to read more middle grade and young adult literature. So first of all, it's really fun to kind of look forward to reading those stories with my kids as they get older. So it's like a fun picture or like view into the future for me in a sense. I have young kids right now, so it's a ways off, but still fun to imagine. And then second of all, sometimes I just need like a low effort read that's going to like get me into a story. Middle grade and YA are enjoyable in their own right for various different reasons, but the lower reading level and sometimes, not always, but sometimes the less emotional damage, sometimes done in YA and MG like level books, at the very least, the lower reading level makes it easier for me to just like get going, even when it's like a rough time or I'm exhausted or whatever. So it's a really great chance to just enjoy something a little bit different, expand my horizons in a different direction. And I also just always get like nostalgic vibes reading these books, even if they're not ones that I've read before. Something about the structure, the pacing, the writing style just feels really nostalgic to me, which is, fun. That's a fun time. So now on to 3 more things I do, I guess, to kind of get back in touch with this reading hobby and make it a more lively, active part of my life right now. I've got 3 more thoughts here that didn't show up in that other video at all in any form. So when you have kids, I'm sure of any age, but in my case, my context is young kids because both my kids are under the age of 3, you just lose time to do the things you enjoy. And of course, that time is replaced by really meaningful, enjoyable quality time with your family, right? And that's what makes it, I think, so hard to then carve out time for individual or like personal hobbies because it's always a trade-off, right? There's always a trade-off there when you have kids especially. So those solo activities and those solo individual hobbies are so hard to squeeze in. So for me, when I'm making the conscious decision to take time for myself away from my family and to make that trade-off, I really want it to be like the most fun it can be for me. Like, I want that to be like an insanely enjoyable part of my life. And because reading has been a lifelong hobby and really meaningful to me, it usually is. But I've noticed that one thing in particular really, really helps me these days with making sure that reading, is as enjoyable for me as it can be when I choose to take the time for myself to do it. I have found that I personally need to throw away any idea, any notion that I am going to be able to take notes or annotate or even like intentionally do some like critical deep thinking while I'm in the midst of reading. I just have had to completely give up on the idea that that's like within my capacity right now. And it has been so freeing to just recognize that I just want reading to be reading right now. And I want it to be a form of escapism and I want it to be fun, like above all else. That's what it needs to do for me right now. Now, that being said, I trust that my brain is smart enough, that I am intelligent enough, and that my brain is capable of processing, dissecting, interpreting, and thinking deeply about what I'm reading, even if I'm not writing down my thoughts in the moment or even afterwards for that matter. I'm an intelligent person. My brain can handle it. I do not have to force myself into doing those things that frankly take away from my enjoyment of reading in this phase of my life. I just don't have to. There's a lot of narratives going around the internet right now that if you are not annotating, thinking deeply, thinking critically, taking extensive notes while you're reading or shortly after reading, then you're sort of squandering the opportunity that reading presents to you, and that you're almost, in some cases, I see the argument that you're basically like reading wrong. I'm just here to say that I firmly disagree and to provide a counterpoint and to take away some of the guilt associated with that if you're not one of the people who enjoys doing that naturally. And also, just to be clear, if you are someone who like doing those things adds to your enjoyment of reading, then like amazing. Or if that's like a skill that you've decided you want to develop or learn or whatever, and you're being intentional about it, awesome. Then like more power to you. That's great. For me, it takes the enjoyment away right now. I need reading to be my form of escape, and I don't think there's any shame in that. I don't think there's a wrong way to read. So if you, like me, kind of just need to have the permission to just read and let reading be reading and nothing else and nothing more in this phase of your life, by all means, go for it and enjoy your hobby. Just have fun. I think that's great. All right, my next tip here is to make trips to the library a family affair. Or if you're more of a bookstore person, then have at it. I'm more of a library person. I like to let my kids kind of peruse the board books or play in like the kid play area, which I know I'm lucky that our libraries have like a little play zone for our children and the children's book area of our library. But I like to let them play over there while I just kind of hang out, read a book, browse books, whatever, and kind of have a relaxing time. I also like to make it a fun activity to come home afterwards and read the books that we all picked out together. Even if your kids aren't old enough to read on their own yet, like mine are not, they can't read yet, I still can just let them sit for like, I don't know, maybe if I'm lucky up to 20 minutes, just like flipping through the books that they picked out for themselves. Or if you're a two-parent household, you can maybe like alternate who's reading the kids their new books while the other parent gets to read their new books. Make it like a fun thing to come home and get into them and give yourself a little bit of time to read. Honestly, sometimes just the trip to the library like satisfies the reader in me and like just gives me the vibes and kind of like reconnects me with that hobby and that reading as like a really essential part of my life. It gets my brain going about like new authors I want to look at, stories that I want to explore. It gets my brain going in like imagination mode, I guess, which is also kind of the mode that my brain likes to enter when I'm reading fiction. And so it kind of like just gets me going in that direction, even if I'm not actively reading before, during, or after that library trip. And then I also think that like longer term, this cultivates an environment in your household where reading is a fun activity. It kind of like predisposes your kids to making space for you to enjoy the things you love and like demonstrates to them that that's okay and that you should take the time for yourself to do things that you love and to understand why it's important to you and meaningful for you. So I think like longer term, I am also hoping, of course I'm not there yet, but I'm hoping that as they get older, it'll start to also help them like appreciate the role that libraries and reading and books play in my life. Even if they are not avid readers as they get older, I hope it cultivates that appreciation for reading in my household. Okay, and then my last tip today is sort of like a two sides of the same coin conversation that is going to feel like it's contradicting itself, but I actually think is kind of goes all along the lines of trying to make reading not overwhelming. We'll just put it that way. So I like to, on one side of the coin, choose books that are really, really different from each other to read like back to back. This helps me not get confused or mix up characters or plot lines, and it helps me have sort of a sense of finality before starting a new book. So it really helps me to switch like genres or read two books one after the other that are in like really different time periods. Or if I'm doing like my 3 formats method that I mentioned earlier, I try to pick books that are pretty different than each other for each of those formats. It just helps me to have like really clean breaks between books. It just helps me clear my mind and kind of start fresh with my new next read. I find that if I read like 10 fantasies, for example, back to back, I start to get plots confused. I start to get characters confused. And to be honest, I get a bit worn down by the genre because oftentimes within a genre, there's kind of like a normal narrative structure, like a normal arc or normal characteristics for our protagonist, even things like that. There's a lot of through lines, right? Which is what I love about a lot of the genres I read. But if I read too much kind of consecutively, I can get a bit like bogged down in it, I guess. So that's side one of the coin. Is my recommendation is to basically pick books that are as distinct from each other as you can when you're switching between different books or between different formats. Now, on the other side of the coin, my exception to this is that if you're in the midst of a series, I would actually err on the side of finish the series before you move on to anything else. So rather than breaking a series up with other types of books in between each book in the series, I would actually just stick with the series as long as you can. Now, sometimes this is really hard, especially if, like me, as I've previously said, you're like a library reader. A lot of times I'm like waiting on a library hold, or the author hasn't even published the next book out, right? So I can't continue. Or I just like, there's a new release that I'm like so excited about outside the series that I just can't help myself. So I'm actually pretty notoriously bad at this, actually. But I have found that the times where I consciously decide to start and finish a series end to end without interruption in between, I get through the series like really fast because I'm like so invested in it. But also I don't like lose track of characters and timelines and plots and whatever. And it just makes the transition from one book in the series to the next a little smoother for me. So these are kind of an interesting, like they almost seem to contradict each other, but really at the end of the day, what I'm trying to say here is like set yourself up well so that the hobby is truly enjoyable. And for me, that's a matter of like keeping a clear head when I move from one book to the next. And whether that's clear head because I'm totally context switching or clear head because I'm keeping consistent within a series and not muddling that series up with other books. Either of those really, really helps me, I've found. There's just so much like mental load that comes with having kids. And so anything I can take off my plate mental load wise for reading and other hobbies I love is a huge relief to me. So those are my 5 tips here. 2 of them kind of recycled from the last video, summarized much, much more shortly than in that video. And then 3 kind of fresh thoughts. And again, just some solidarity here. Like, man, it's hard out there. It's so hard to make time for your hobbies. And there is always that kind of lingering thought in the back of my head whenever I am taking time to read of like, this could be time with my girls or my husband or other people in my life that I care about. And so I think having a solo hobby like this can sometimes be really, really challenging as a parent and can feel simultaneously a bit like isolating and I'm not sure. I don't know that I even really have the right words to articulate this right now, but if you've got solidarity to share, if you've got other tips, please put them down in the comments below. I would love to hear them, and I'm sure other people watching would also love to hear them. Yeah, this is something I'm still navigating, 100% still navigating this, especially because my kids are young and I'm just kind of coming out of the newborn fog. So totally open to thoughts. And if you're still watching at this point, just know you're doing great. You are. Listen, you woke up today choosing to be the best parent you can possibly be, and I'm positive you're doing that. I'm positive you're going into it with the best of intentions, and I'm sure you're doing a phenomenal job, the best job you absolutely can be doing. So hang in there, read some good books, leave me some thoughts below, give me your best tips and tricks. Thank you so, so much for being here, and I will see you next time.